Hey YouTube, it's Adobe back again with 8th updates. So I get asked a lot to discuss masteries and kind of my mastery build setup and what masteries are. And so I thought I would do a multi-part mastery series. And in order to do any series effectively, I think you have to come to a common definition and make sure everybody knows kind of what you're talking about. And so I thought I'd start the first series with some of the jargon and some of the lingo that I think a lot of content creators who are talking to some people when they create their content who have been playing the game for years at this point, and some of the people may not necessarily realize or kind of have in the back of their mind what these things are on a regular basis. So I thought I'd start with stony cores and carb cores, or carbs, and not some weird diet or anything, but some people call them carbs. And the reason I thought I'd start with these is because they're the foundation to purchasing all of the really expensive masteries. That I think are absolutely not just useful but critical if you want to kind of get to the content that is at the end of the game, towards the Act 6, the Abyss of Legend, and so forth. So let's start out with looking at the builds. How are you going to build out your mastery setup? And there's three main trees: the offensive tree, which you see here on the screen, and you can scroll over to the right and you can see some of the more expensive masteries on the right. The defensive tree, and your proficiencies tree. So there's three main trees for any one given build within a mastery. Okay, and so those are important. So the first one we'll start with is the offensive tree. And when you start with an offensive tree, it's important to talk about, do you want to do what we call a suicide build within the game's lingo as a suicide build, a non-suicide build, or a free-to-play build. And the first thing that you'll see on the suicide build is liquid courage, and double edge, and then recoil. And these are the three main things that make up an effective suicide build. And the reason for these is the reason they call them that, and not a term I would have chosen, but again, the reason it's called that is because you get a massive attack bonus, but in the course of doing so, for most cases, you lose health in doing so, right? So you're losing health, but you get a massive attack bonus. And so the thought is that you can quickly dispatch and KO the defender or your opponent before you do too much damage to yourself. And so you see recoil, right? And what it does is on special 1 or special 2s, you can fire off a special 1 or special 2, and you can get a 30% boost to that special attack, but take 5% damage. Now at the end of that 5%, or that at the end of the special, if you haven't KO'd the opponent with the special, then you'll take the 5%. So it does work at the end, which is important to know, okay, and how to think about playing your masteries, and playing your style of play, right? And so with liquid edge then, liquid edge is the poison, and liquid courage, excuse me, is your poison, and double edge is your bleed effect. And so essentially you're going to take poison indefinitely throughout the fight, right? But the bleed effect will take off of you after about 16 seconds, right? And for doing those, if you have them maxed out like I do, you get a 60% attack boost, which is the best you can get for an attack boost anywhere in game. You can get 30% boost, but they don't come close to that. So then the next lingo is, you hear MD a lot, MD. Right, and that stands for Mystic Dispersion, and this used to be more prevalent in the game. Some players, if they're running a lot of Mystic Champions, because it's only used for Mystic Champions, when they nullify buffs, which most Mystic Champions do, you get a power resurge, right? So you get a jump in power. And this is great for champions all across the board: Symbiote Supreme, Doctor Doom, everybody, right? And then next is Parry, and Parry's an interesting one because Parry is what all the players say, but in game, if you go and you look at the descriptions of each champion, it'll always say if a well-timed block is applied, right? And what they really mean is parry, okay? And the reason they call it well-timed block and not parry is because technically you don't have to have that mastery, and if you hit a well-timed block, it's not going to stun the opponent like it will if you have the parry mastery, but you can still get the effect of a well-timed block based on champion node. So that's why they call it well-timed block, but almost everybody runs parry because it's such a huge aspect of the game that we all just call it parry. So it does cause you to stun the opponent, and that stun can be increased the more points you have in parry as well as stupefy. You'll notice I'm only running 1 in stupefy, not 3 in stupefy, which I could maybe use with a couple extra points there. Then you'll see I just showed up dexterity and limber on the screen, and so a lot of times dexterity is referred to as dex, which we'll come back to here in a minute. But limber is when you hear content creators talk about a lot, but they don't really refer to it in terms of their own champions. What they refer to it is as for a node, right? And so they'll say a limber node, right? And that's what a lot of nodes are called. But what that means is that on the limber node, okay, that if you stun somebody through a parry or any other method of stunning, that your stun is less time than what it would be if the limber node wasn't on. And so it's important, right? So you need to keep that in the back of your mind. If you hear, content creators say the limber node, okay, is that it's going to reduce your stun time, okay, that you apply to the champion, okay. And so then we come back to the offensive screen because I think a lot of people don't really look at this precision and cruelty, and they don't necessarily understand the difference between the two. So critical rating here, right? Precision. So people will say crit a lot, right? And that there's 2 different types of crit. There's crit rating, which increases your ability to crit. So how often will you crit, right? Which is why I've got mine capped out at 5. And then cruelty, which is your crit damage rating, which is how much your crit actually hits for. Right? And so it's an important distinction, but a lot of content creators, they just say you're crit, right? And a lot of people just don't necessarily understand the difference between the two, right? And so you'll see that I don't have much in lesser precision or lesser cruelty right now because I'm saving up for more of the expensive masteries on the right side of the tree. And so we'll talk about considerations in the next part of the series and whatnot. And then finally, are you an endgame player? And so what does that mean, an endgame player? What it really means is that you're trying to get that final content always. Right? You're pushing to get through Act 6, and get through the Abyss of Legends, get through Labyrinth of Legends, those kind of things. So if you like what you saw, if you have any questions, comments, leave them below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. I've got the next part in the series coming up soon. So thank you guys. Have a great night.